Alright tubes, got a big video today. Got this Jackson Racing cold air intake here, and the flying Miata old school Link standalone ECU. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to install these. This is going to be just one video for the install of both. I was going to separate it into two, but the reason I'm not going to do that is, long story short, this Link ECU, the standalone ECU here, does away with the mass airflow sensor to tune fuel delivery. It instead uses a manifold pressure sensor and an intake temperature sensor. And so the deal is that I got this as a package, and the intake actually already has the intake air temperature sensor installed in it. So rather than have to take that out and either put that in the stock system or figure out another temporary intake, we're just going to install them in one go. So the first thing we're going to need to do here is we're going to get rid of this stock intake. That's going to go. So I'm going to loosen this clamp here and this clamp here and undo the hoses and get this crossover tube out of the way. I just pulled the crossover tube here, and I discovered this mess going on here. I don't know what the hell that is. But in any case, I think it's a good thing we got rid of that. And I figured I would show you here. This is our stock mass airflow sensor. And if you look at this thing, there's a ton of restriction in there. I mean, yes, I realize that I can stick my hand and go all the way through, but there's just a lot of restriction going on there. Not to mention, I mean, it pulls the air through this little tiny tube in the back that goes up over there and all that, but there's a lot of restriction that goes on here, and that's one of the reasons that we're going to be getting rid of this thing and putting the other intake in there. Alrighty now, so I'm starting to fit this thing, and by the way, yes, I am going to take out the stock air box, but it's not actually in the way. But anyhow, I'm test fitting this thing in here, and there's another video on YouTube. I think it's Car and Throttle. It says Australian guys, and they got a video of putting this thing in there, and they're showing how it's all tight and stuff to get it in there. What I did was I kind of just put it in on an angle and had to wiggle it back and forth a bunch of times, and finally popped and slipped into this spot here, which is pretty close where it's supposed to be. Alright, so here is our little hose that needs to get in here, and as you can see, the way I'm holding it is the way that it needs to go. And already one thing that I'm noticing is that this little connector here, which is for that idle air control hose here, I think this hose is either going to need to be replaced or flipped upside down in order to work and be hooked up properly. So I will address that when I come to that bridge. But anyhow, the way I'm going to try and get this in here, probably going to require two hands, but just going to try and start feeding it down. I'm trying to avoid unhooking any of these hoses. I'm not afraid to hook the idle air control hose up because that's going to probably have to be changed anyway, but I'm not trying to unhook anything else if I don't have to. So I'm going to try and manipulate this thing and get this in there. So stand by. Alright, I did a few things just to make this easier. I did pull that idle air control hose off of there to get that out of the way. I also pulled the coolant hose off the radiator there, that upper coolant line from the radiator to the thermostat, got that out of the way, and that makes it a lot easier. And then what I did, instead of having to try and mess with this while it's down in there, is I cut the original line just so it was into a 90 here, the way it has to go, and then I already put that onto here, so that should make things a little easier, hopefully. Alright, so we're making some progress here. I think I'm going to have to go to the store tomorrow and buy some clamps, one for up here and one for down there, but we're getting there. It's getting installed, that's for sure. And as you can see down in here, the intake air, the idle air control valve hose, I've got that all hooked up. So now what I'm doing is I'm just hooking up the wires for the intake air temperature sensor, and again, this is specific to the Link ECU. But the one wire is the black wire, and we just grounded that out. It's just a ground, so we grounded that right here to this engine ground where a couple other things are grounded to. And the next thing is this wire here, and what we're going to hook that to is, if we look over here on the power steering pump, there's a blue wire connected to it. And what's actually going to happen is that is going to come off of the pump, no longer going to be that wire on the pump there, and then that's going to get connected to this white wire here. Alright, so now we're going to move on to swapping out the ECU here. And so I'm pretty sure 94 and up, maybe 93 and up, but definitely 94 and up, any of the 1.8s. The ECU is located, it's behind the seat, the passenger seat, and you got to pull up the carpet here, and then it's up against the wall here. There's two 10 millimeter bolts holding it in, or nuts. There's that one there, and then one there. So we're gonna take those out, and then we lift it up a little bit. Then we'll unplug the wiring. All right, I got the stock ECU out. Unfortunately for me, my job here is going to be pretty easy. Normally, back in the day, if you bought a brand new Link ECU, what they do is they send you a board, but there's no case for it. And what you actually do is you take the old ECU out, you take the board out, and then you put the Link board in, and cut a little slit in the thing for this little ribbon connector, which is for the keypad. Fortunately for me, I bought this ECU with that already done. So all I have to do is take this little mounting bracket and put it on the one with the Link inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead and swap them over. Alright, now, before we actually just plug the new ECU in, we actually have to make a change to one of these wires here. And so this can vary year to year. This is only going to apply for 94 to 95. So what you should do, if you haven't been referring to it already, is download from Flying Miata their installation model for your particular year, and they'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Now, in my particular manual, the wiring, the pinout was absolutely horrible. It was blurry, and you couldn't even read which wires they were, so I had to look it up. But here's the deal. First thing you got to do is you got to expose the wires, and the way you do that is it's kind of hard to figure out. I didn't think the instructions were very clear, but this thing here, hopefully you can see what's going on here. On this connector, you have this little hinged thing. This thing here, I don't want to, it's quote hinged, but all it is just plastic bending, so I don't want to move it back and forth too much. But see, this thing can move back and forth here, and the way you get that out is there's a little tab that goes through this hole here. So what you got to do is stick like a knife in each side, and then you can open that up. So that's the first thing, is you got to open those connectors up. Now, of course, before any of this, you should definitely disconnect your battery. That's for sure. Now, once you get these little hinged things open here, there's two wires we're going to pull out, and again, it can vary, but on this particular one, we're going to swap. We're going to take 1M, which is this green and red wire, and tape that off. That's going to be unused, and then the other one is going to be 1P, which is on the other side, and we're going to put that one in this spot. And the way that you take these out is it's a little bit difficult, but what you do is you take something like this, like a pick or something, maybe even a screwdriver, but the pick's probably a little less flimsy. And basically what you're doing is you're taking this thing and you're pushing it through here. You know, this is when it's actually still installed. So you're pushing it through. The focus isn't that great at the moment, unfortunately, but you're pushing through here, and then once that is all the way through, it'll release this thing, and then you can pull them both out at once. And in my experience, just now doing it for the first time, you just got to try a bunch of times, keep pushing it through, and then trying to pull them both out at the same time, and finally it'll click and it'll pull out. So I got this one out. I'm going to take the other one out and then put it in there. Now, in case you're wondering why you're doing this, the wire that we're going to take out and put in that spot is the yellow and white wire, this one right here. And you may recall that just so happens to be the same one that we hooked up to that intake air temperature sensor. So however Flying Miata designed the ECU, it's set up so that temperature has to go into that pin over there. So that's all I had to say about that. So we're going to get that swapped over and bolt it back in. And then the last thing is just the manifold air pressure sensor, which is this little thing here. And it's very simple to hook that up. You can see what plugs into it is what used to plug into the stock mass airflow sensor. So you have that, and then you just have a little pressure line coming off of that. And for the time being, I just hooked it up here, which is where the vacuum line for the cruise control used to be. Alright, rolled it outside here to get some better visibility, better light going on here. and pretty much tidied everything up under the hood, and I'm pretty happy with it. I went out and picked up the clamps, so that's secured on there well, and this hose is secured on here down as well. And I went ahead and put the top on it. I'll have to clean that up with some Armor All. Not that the rest of the engine bay is that clean, but the only other thing that I have to do now that I didn't think to do while I was out is pick up some double-sided tape. This is the manifold air pressure sensor, and that's supposed to get stuck right to this little box here, and I still don't have the double-sided tape. One other thing, with this particular setup, I know they sell a relocation bracket, but with this particular intake, you can no longer use the stock hood holder as it was intended, because if you try to take it down, that gets in the way. So what I've done here is I've actually taken it out, so it's no longer stays in there, and I just keep that in the trunk or something for the time being. All right, now last thing I'm doing is just wrapping up the interior here. I've pretty much covered the computer back up. Just got to put some of the trim back together, and this is the keypad that's used for making changes, and so I ran that through. It comes up behind the carpet and sneaks in right there. Nobody will see that when the seat's back, and sits right in here inside the center console, so I'll be able to do my tuning and everything that needs to be done right from there. So that's about it. I think that's going to end this video. I'm not going to do any tuning in this one. I will make another video of that though, but hopefully this is somewhat helpful both for those interested in the link and also those interested in the Jackson Racing intake. I tried to cover both, and if there's anything that I kind of glossed over and it wasn't clear, just leave it down in the comments, and I'll do my best to clarify. So thanks for watching, tubes.